In this update, we're going to break down the weather over the next 7 days, which includes two snowstorms, several rounds of severe storms, including some flooding rain. So let's look at the big picture this morning and break down the details for you. We've got this atmospheric plume of moisture entering the Pacific Northwest. That's dumping feet of snow up there towards the Cascades regions. We also have a steady plume of moisture coming in off the southwest flow, and that is a warm flow, and that's lifting a warm front out of the Gulf in towards the Houston Metroplex this morning. That's going to kick off some severe storms. We also have a low pressure center, which is the parent low out here towards the Four Corners regions. That's actually dumping some heavier snows in around the Flagstaff and Santa Fe region. That's the beginning stages of our first snowstorm, while our lake effect snow machine up here towards the Great Lakes is starting to wind down, at least for now. So let's take a look at some of the temperatures this morning, because we're still feeling the effects of that Arctic blast, especially out here towards the east. Look how far south these freezing temperatures. You saw it yesterday this morning. You're actually seeing it again. I mean, it's still cold out there, but look at the difference, right? There's that southwest flow. That's the warm flow with the parent low still out west there. That is going to set the stage for some severe weather down further south later on this morning into the afternoon hours. So here's your parent low we're talking about. That's the snow side. That's the colder side. Here's the warm, wet side, severe weather side. Mainly going to be inundating east of the I-35 corridor, but I'm really concerned down here towards the Houston Metroplex, right along that warm front. That's what we have to be concerned about, because the atmosphere is rotating, and we're going to be getting in a time frame we're likely going to be entering a tornado watch down here in this region. But yes, these could be lifting northbound. Not too concerned about severe storms further north in and around central and North Texas, but yes, definitely around the Houston Metroplex, especially around the College Station region, shifting down into the Victoria region. That would shift over into Lake Charles. Here's the main culprit of tornadic activity. So it's not really there's a small marginal risk for large hail and some damaging winds, but the main concern is likely a conditional risk for some spin up tornadoes going through a heavily populated area later on this morning into the afternoon. So if you live within the College Station region down here towards Columbus into the Houston Metroplex, you're in the kind of the bullseye, if you will, the most favored area to seeing a tornadic spin up, because that's exactly where this warm front is stalling out this morning as it's draped across the southeastern regions of Texas. And then as it moves through heading into tomorrow, that severe threat subsides a little bit, but still on the marginal side, definitely some very heavy rain that's going to be inundating right along the areas of I-10 corridor, back into Lake Charles, through New Orleans, into the Mobile region, heading up into Montgomery, and those will eventually shift off towards the Tallahassee region. But look at the rainfall, and this is some pretty impressive, folks. In fact, it's actually been probably a tad bit more progressive than what it was showing yesterday. So it's a twofold punch, with you got less areas in Texas getting the rain because you got a dry slot coming in on the backside. Just to the north of there's that parent low. But if you're underneath where that secondary low pressure is further down here to the coast, look at that, man. That's some impressive rainfall. These areas are in a desperate drought, and it's one of those things that's, droughts end in floods, and that's sometimes exactly what happens. You get too much too fast, and we could be looking at some serious rain really elongating along these regions. So this is the rainfall over the next 24 hours, going to be impacting, lifting as far north, heading into central Missouri, as well. We'll be watching our low pressure center on the northern side of the front. That's going to be the snowy side in our snowstorm. So here's the overall setup as far as, highlighting the rain amounts. Yeah, we could be looking at some pretty significant rains further south as this list further north, taken into account going into that Saturday morning time frame. So some very heavy rain. If we kind of zoom in to that region, yeah, Beaumont could be picking up 4 or 5 inches of rain down here to Lake Charles. You get back in towards the Lafayette region into Baton Rouge. I mean, some of these areas further south along the coastal areas, Not out of the question. You might see a double digit total somewhere in this vicinity, but it's going to be a sharp gradient. Look at the cutoff here where you basically go to Jackson and you don't really see much of anything. And then further south, you get a lot of the rain just over the next 48 hours. So it's going to be kind of feast or famine down here towards the southeast. But let's talk about the cold side of this, because there is going to be a cold side, and where that low pressure is, it's going to be pretty mighty. It's going to be small. So if you're underneath that, you're like, wow, where'd the snow come from? It's going to come down fast and furious. This is a classic frontogenesis type setup with this cold front, and time of day has a lot to deal with it because we're heading into the middle of the night. And so as that rain starts to fall, you have dynamic cooling that atmosphere. All layers of the atmosphere, that rain quickly changes over to kind of a freezing rain, slushy sleet mix, and then it changes over to all snow up there into the Texas Panhandle, western Oklahoma, into western portions of Kansas. And this is just going to be lifting northbound throughout the evening into the Friday morning time frame. Again, with that sharp gradient, this is going to be a small zone, you know, maybe 50 to 100 miles there. But if you're underneath that zone, wow, it's going to be I'm thinking a fairly impressive snowstorm, and going to leave some pretty healthy amounts across these regions through western portions of Kansas, and that'll eventually head up into northwestern portions of Missouri, up in southern Iowa here, and then eventually heading up into northern Illinois, heading into Friday morning. And that just extends heading into Michigan as we go into that Friday afternoon time frame, as we still got that convective banding with that snow demarcation line with some of that heavier snow. And then of course you got the rain falling on the south side, with the rain shifting off into the southeast. And as it does, we could have another burst of snow right there elongating in these areas. It kind of feeds over these areas. These areas actually had some snow, and they still have snow on the ground. So by the time it actually may melt, it's melting now, it's going to be laying down another blanket. So with the snowpack on the ground, as this second plume of moisture comes through, it sees the colder air, and it's likely going to be colder than what you would typically see if you didn't have any snow on the ground. So that produces the snow again in these kind of the same areas, and into portions of Iowa, back into northern Illinois by then. And that's not until Sunday morning. So that's the backside precipitation. So here's the small but mighty snowstorm, which is our first snowstorm. You've got the Intermountain West. The Cascades just get crushed with very heavy snow, 2 to 3 feet up in the mountain regions, Idaho, back into portions of Montana, back into Wyoming here. Some pretty healthy amounts across the Intermountain West, back into Flagstaff, into Santa Fe, down towards Albuquerque region. There's highlighting the first initial snowstorm over the Texas Panhandle. Remember, this is an area that got hit hard just this last week. And some of the same areas are going to get hit hard again with, I think once it gets to Kansas, it still rolls through Kansas. It might be just a tad bit further north than what you saw actually last week. But nonetheless, yeah, it's a small but mighty snowstorm that pulls through Iowa, northern Illinois, through Michigan here. Then it'll eventually feed up into the Great Lakes. But look at the snowpack going into next week. So this is where we are right now. Remember, Ontario and Quebec has just been getting crushed lately. And still we got that northwest flow. We've had a lot of lake effect snow up here across this region. So we're going to have another colder push of air going to be impacting the eastern seaboard. And as that pulls down, that's actually going to be a colder air mass than what it would typically be if we didn't have this healthy snowpack to contend with for that air mass to go over. So as that air mass goes over that snowpack, that is going to pull the colder air further south. So that's going to be having a reinforcing shot of that colder air, mainly elongating across the eastern seaboard. So you're not going to be warming up. You're going to stay on the colder side, as much of the west sees a dominating ridge of high pressure going to be impacting going into that second week of December, into that December 4th time frame. Remember, we talked about on my December outlook, highlighting that second week, I felt like a rapid warm-up was going to be taking place. It's going to originate out west, and it's going to be slowly migrating eastbound really all week long. So we still got some colder air and some snow. And in fact, our big snowstorm going to be highlighting up here towards New England. But there's the colder air, right? That's the setup for Monday and Tuesday time frame with those colder temperature anomalies pulling through that cold air mass out to eastern Canada there. That's going to push all that colder air across the East Coast. And it's just a rapid difference out there towards the western regions as we have that massive ridge is going to be filtering in 20 to 25 degrees above average. Seriously warm air for December standards. And that will be slowly shifting from west to east kind of all throughout the week, but not before our big snowstorm that's going to unload on into New England. So if you live within the upstate New York, getting into Vermont, New Hampshire, may shift into portions of Massachusetts, but especially into Maine, this area just gets crushed on Monday and Tuesday timeframe coming up into the early part of next week. And as it does, and we still have that colder plume, right? We still have the colder plume pulling further south, mainly impacting the East Coast. We're still going to have the northwest flow. So we're going to have a second surge as this pulls through of colder air, and still going to have the cold air in place. And we should start to see that changeover again across these regions that really hasn't seen that much snow. So I'm mentioning this because getting a lot of comments, hey, where's my snow in Pennsylvania? Hey, we got some, at least. We got some coming by the middle of next week, as the colder air will still be in place as that northwest flow is still going to be active. But that's not going to last long, folks, because remember, we got that rapid warm up on the way. So by the time we hit Thursday, look at the high temperatures, folks. That's some crazy stuff, almost pushing 60 degrees up there towards the Canadian border for December the 7th. So that's going to be plenty warm air across the lower 48 that we're going to be contending with. And eventually, we're going to be saying goodbye to even the snow up here. It's still going to see the snowpack, and that's why these areas are actually still going to be below freezing up here towards New England. But eventually, this warmer air will start to migrate and eventually kind of overtake much of the lower 48 by the time we get to the end of next week. But between now and then, we got some pretty healthy snows to talk about and to deal with up here towards into New England. This is your pretty consistent totals. The data has been pretty consistent over the last couple of days, and it's still showing some pretty good, significant 12 inches to 18 inches of snow within along these pink shaded regions. Lighter amounts as you shift further south into Pennsylvania, but still nonetheless, you could see some snow in West Virginia, maybe the northern fringes of Indiana, as well as Ohio. But yeah, as this snowstorm will start to wind down, and that colder air is still going to be in place by still the middle of next week. But if we highlight the rain over where the precipitation is going to be over the next 7 days, it kind of looks like this, right? We've got the atmospheric river of moisture going to be inundating the Pacific Northwest. Most of this is going to be rain in the lower elevations below the 3,500 foot level. Heavy snow upwards to higher than 3,500 feet. Once you pass 5,000 feet, you're talking 30 inches or greater across those Cascade regions. There's the parent low. They'll be dumping mainly snow across these regions within Flagstaff and Santa Fe. And then there's that system with the dry slot mainly impacting much of Texas. But once it hits that Gulf east of the I-35 corridor, there's the heavier rains that we showed you along the I-10 corridor. Lighter amounts as you shift further north, but still decent amounts to contend with to eat away some of these droughts across Kentucky into Tennessee, back into portions of West Virginia. And of course, further north, I showed you that first initial snowstorm that's going to unload across these regions. Small but mighty, right? And that'll eventually feed into the northwest flow, and then most of this will actually be in the form of snow into some of those regions like I talked about. And then further south, it'll be just an all chillier rain. So I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch me next update where I protect you for and after the storm.